Hey, this is just a quick note to let you know that Team Champs 2025 has been sponsored by City Strength. You're probably already familiar with City Strength. They're Australia's exclusive retailer for SBD, but they also sell a broader range of strength and powerlifting related equipment. So, a big thanks to City Strength for sponsoring our competition this year. And I hope you enjoy this episode. G'day, everyone.
It's
I'm here
true.
with Tyler Seabrook of Apex Strength. I'm really excited to have Tyler in. We were actually supposed to chat last week, but we decided to put it off and wait till the final nominations have been submitted. We're less than 3 weeks out from Team Champs, so it's going to be an interesting discussion. And Apex were really a powerhouse last year. So welcome, Tyler. Good to see you.
Thank you, brother. And yeah, it was convenient that I got sick as fuck, so we could now do this after nominations are complete. Because yeah, it would have been. Which we can jump into this. It didn't change as much as I was expecting.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, you were sick last week. I'm glad you're feeling a little bit better. But in a strange way, yeah, glad that we're able to chat and actually. I think you're the first person I'm chatting to post those changes. So we've actually got the final list. So if you're listening at home, you can check the lifter list, the links in our Instagram bio. It's on Lifting Cast. You can kind of see the full list there. But like you said, not a lot of changes compared to last year. Talk us through what you're expecting then.
Yeah, because last year, because there was so many changes last year, I was kind of like, because I sort of got a spreadsheet together and ran all the numbers, what I expected everyone off just like open powerlifting, and then there's a few athletes who I have a better idea of what they're actually going to do. But yeah, nothing was crazy. No big changes that was like, wow, like there was 6 people in this class, now there's only 1 versus I think the other way, last year's or 2024, like the lighter weight classes had an influx of people, and some of the more stacked classes like the 105s, 100s, sorry, was it 100s? No, 110s. They become a lot less stacked than what they were. For example, there was only 2 athletes in the 110s, if you can correct me there. But yeah, so interestingly enough, it didn't change too much. So there wasn't too like, there's been sort of changes over the last few months, more so like, athletes coming in and out, but no shocks, I guess. What's your perspective on that comparison to previous years?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because last year the date of final changes was so chaotic, like you said. Some teams did full rejigs. There was a mass exodus of some weight classes and big shifts. Like I feel like the talking point last year was the 48-kilo women's. Started with 1, ended up with 5. We saw that across the board, and yeah, this year a lot less of that. I think I'd be curious to hear what your perspective is at being a coach in the event. I suspect it's got to do with 2 things. One is obviously the rule that we introduced this year where you can only make 2 changes on that final date just to prevent this kind of like chaos. But I also think coaches have like, what's the word? Overcompensated. They've gone, well, let's not muck around with it because other people are going to muck around. Let's just like stick to our guns and let everyone else play the game. But then they've all just like stood there kind of in
But
the
then
stalemate. Nobody's
no
played the
one played
game.
the game. Yeah.
And they're like, oh
Yeah,
shit. And now you have this situation where the 83 and 93 men's, like those 2 classes, have 24 lifters between them. Whereas, that's the middle men's weight classes. You expect them to be full or busy, but they have 11 and 13 lifters respectively. Whereas I'm looking at the 63 women's weight class, which you'd expect to be very busy. It's the middle class. There's only 3 girls in there. And so I feel like there was lots of opportunities to like give yourself better chances of scoring some points. If clubs had these types of lifters, but I think like the 63, like I understand the 59 men's, right? Not everybody has 59 kilo men's in their rosters.
yeah,
63
yeah.
kilo women's, man. Like every gym has got 63 kilo women. I'm just so surprised that some of these classes are not as full as they could or should be.
Yeah, it's true. I think you pretty much summarize it quite well. And look, you've done this a few years now, and you understand and get it. But I think the 2 things were correct in the sense of 2 changes, a month back, and then 2 changes. That definitely made me do, because obviously I made one switch, was bringing myself out and Lotta in. So Lotta was kind of on the fence when I originally brought it up to her, a few months back before, 4 months back, whatever it was. But we definitely decided, yes, we're going to execute this. And I kind of thought about that for a second where I was like, if I need to make some major changes coming into the comp 3 weeks out, I don't want to leave myself like short with only having 2 options if I had to make more options. And there was questions about the health of one of my athletes, for example, who is now fine, but it was always a question mark as to whether we could get his body to a point to be competitive in this competition. But yeah, I think you're right in the sense of overcompensation from last year. All the coaches were considering, like, people are going to make all these big changes, so they're like, let's just leave it, and they'll move out of our classes. But in this time, everyone's sort of stuck to their guns, I would call it, because there is a bunch of classes that I would say every class, or most classes, there is a few, like the 63s, 59 men's, 63 women's, where they're a little bit short in the sense of competition, but then most other classes, there's at least two who are competitive, and it'll be like neck and neck between them.
Yes.
So there is a lot of classes that do have that. So there was no real good reason for switching into another class, especially the stack classes, because you're going into it, oh, well, now I've got to try beat, the guy who just won nationals in APA, or, someone like what's the point of going into the 120 plus when you got to verse Tony Reinmuth? It's like, there's so many classes that did have at least one or two very competitive athletes. And I think that definitely scared off a lot of people making some switches. Outside of, there was a few classes that slipped through the gaps, which I think you'll find every year there'll be a few classes that slip through the gaps a little bit, just because of coincidence,
Of course, yeah, a bit of statistics.
Because we don't know. Yeah, we don't know like who's going to be in what. For me personally, I consider the last minute weight change for one of my athletes, because I did overhear in one of the podcasts you did with the compound lads, talking about bringing down a 120 into the 105s, but then he would have had two 105s under compounds. I was like, is he really going to do that? Because obviously they'll take points off each other. Ultimately, they didn't end up doing that, so I'm glad I didn't make the switch in the end, but I definitely thought about it.
Yeah, right. No, it's interesting. And I think, like you said, there's always going to be gaps just by coincidence. Like it's going to be, that's just how statistics and maths work. But I am hoping that next year we have a deeper field again. Like this year we have 19 teams, but my goal for next year already is to have 25. I'd love to have 25 teams. 25 is just such a beautiful number. 15 on day one is a full comp on its own. And then you get another 10 teams the next day. 25 teams is 100 lifters, and there's 16 classes, so 16 weight classes. So if you have 100 lifters divided across 16 classes, on average, you're already getting 6 or 7 lifters a class. So maybe next year there's a little bit more depth again, but I mean, that's not to say that this year isn't deep. Like some of those classes are intense, and we are going to get into them because you've got some lifters in those categories. So let's just quickly go through who is representing Team Apex. It's basically the same team as last year with one difference.
Correct. Yeah. So Ardua is the inclusion, who basically from the start, I went in with the attitude of asking the team that got us to third place last year, giving them the opportunity first. So part of my decision making in terms of making the team was being like, all right, let's see if the previous team from the last year is interested in competing again and representing the team again, considering the success of that year was off their backs. So that was definitely, for example, Asher was the guy who was in last year's, which by the way was a cool addition, because remember that was his first competition.
First comp, I remember, of course.
And I thought he handled himself as well as he was going, as well as I expected him to. He did really well. Gave it his best to try and win the 120s, but I think it was not Remy. One of the Chads was just too strong. He didn't have enough time. He didn't have enough time to try and catch him. But then later that year, he went on to win nationals and add something like 140 kilos to his total. So he, fantastic athlete, and what I thought he was going to become, he has become in that sense. So it was awesome to see that come to fruition, because obviously that was a risk I took last year with bringing Asher into the team. But yeah, so Ardua was the inclusion, obviously the 80 for women's. Really interested to see that battle with Emily, who's obviously a veteran powerlifter as well. Next we have Lotta, who obviously was in last year's. She was a 67.5 last year, so she's got a kilo and a half to play with in the 69 women's for the IPF weight class. Definitely coming in as the favourite, and pretty much just needs to back up her performance from last year. She's looking strong. Keen to see what she puts on the platform, and just so much experience, and she can handle the pressure as she did last year. So yeah, really excited for Lotta. Then we got Tony Reinmuth, been in the game for over a decade. Unfortunately, doesn't have a heap of competition in his class, which is probably the downside of 120 plus. Right, is it's very rare, especially in a local event, to have like a stacked class, you could say.
Like you said, people avoid the class because Tony's there. so it's a bit of a ironic, it like feeds into itself.
Yeah, it's a bit like that as well. But yeah, I'm keen to see what we can pull together on the day, and just looking just to put a 9 for 9 total together for Tony. Make sure dots is nice and high for potential coming down to dots at the end, which last year it did.
It'll be GL points this year, by the way, but
GL points, yeah, sure. So yeah, making sure obviously the point system is a priority for Tony, and just putting a good total together. And then finally, Gabrielle, who was in last year's as well. He's the 105 that I was talking about. We had question marks because he did compete just 6 weeks ago. So quick turnarounds, and had some niggles and issues, but I quickly basically programmed very specific to getting his body back to good health and numbers where there have been previously and over and above. And it's looking good with 3 weeks still to spare. So that's the team.
Awesome. I do love that your team is more or less the same as last year. I mean, there are a number of teams who have repeat lifters, but I don't think, off the top of my head, I don't think there's a single team that's the exact same four. I think that's very rare. So to have like a three quarters of your team basically a repeat, I think is awesome, and I think it speaks a lot to like the consistency in everyone's training and getting them all back there. I do want to kind of preview each of those classes because I know you mentioned Tony Reinmuth doesn't have a lot of competition. He does have Jason Oakley in his class, so at least there's 2. But of course, Tony Reinmuth, international level lifter, isn't going to have any troubles as long as he hits his openers. But I do want to talk about some of the other classes, and maybe let's go lightest to heaviest. So let's start with Loda. And I find it really interesting that you mentioned that Loda is coming in as the favorite, because I would agree with that. But that 69 class, I think, is just going to be an amazing class to watch. Like,
yes,
I think that'll be the class with the highest average points, like GL points. Like, it's the deepest, it's the most competitive. It's the class where anyone could finish first and anyone could finish fifth.
Yeah, because you got 3 or 4 ladies who are all totaling over 400. All it takes is a couple missed lifts to drop a spot or gain a spot, or even just one missed lift. So it's as you point out, and I did notice that they are the final rostered class as well. So it will come down to the 69 women's class for the end of the competition, which I thought was an interesting. Whether or not you do that on purpose, or is that
of course. I mean, just because that's
like that.
Because initially it was going to be the heavier classes last, as always.
As
in the
typical,
women's,
yeah,
in the women's it's not as competitive, and I want there to be a bit of not necessarily drama. Of course, you want there to be drama and storytelling, but I also want the coaches to have the opportunity to fight like that. Like, I want them to have the chances, and even just looking at these nominated totals, like, oh, sorry, where am I going here? Loda, obviously last year she totaled 440 at 67 halves, coming in as a favorite. She doesn't really post much online. I haven't seen much of her training, but if she's in the same form, 440 plus is going to be there for sure. But Jess Lamb has totaled over 400 numerous times. Isabella Macro has totaled over 400 numerous times. Largie has totaled over 400 a couple of times. Carmen Di Domenico is a little bit like Loda in the sense that she's a little bit quieter, doesn't really post much online. I think she's totaled 390 plus a while ago. And so I just know that's going to be a really competitive class. All those lifters are premier bracket lifters. So yeah, that's going to be an awesome.
Yeah, I did notice that. Yeah, I am looking forward to that battle. And I prefer to be the underdog. So in that situation, unfortunately, we're the ones getting chased, right? And it is spicy that it is the final group they'll be lifting, because obviously I specifically have that advantage where 3 of the 4 lifters are in the last session of the last day. So I do I can kind of look at, what everyone's done on the whole day. Where do we need to be? What kind of dots or GL points do we need? Yeah, so that advantage is definitely in my favor, and yeah, I'm excited for it. I'm excited for Lotto, like especially like just love how competitive she is, and how she can handle the pressure in the moment as well, which is really cool to see.
Awesome. Yeah. So I'd agree with you. Lotto coming in as the favorite, but yeah, man, don't. It's not gonna
There's
be.
a
It's not
few
gonna be a walk in
nip.
the park for sure. Yeah,
No,
absolutely.
no. And she's very humble in that sense that she wouldn't be coming in like boasting or anything like that. She'll be like, oh man, like there's some strong girls in this field. And again, as a credit to her character, that she's not arrogant in that sense. She's really modest. And but it's just end of the day, powerlifting is what we can pull together, and it's cool that the totals are going to be done at the same time, because some situations, whether it's like Ardua's class, Emily has to compete on the Saturday, and then we're going on Sunday. So we kind of know like, all right, what numbers has she done? Right now, we just know we have to beat that, and then you can kind of plan for that a little bit. So it's a bit more of a strange situation when you are on the premier day versus the first days. With a lot of situation, it's going to be spicy, and it just be a lot of tension, and you'll get out of what you want in the competition, right? And in terms of the excitement of the competition, because last year's was brilliant, right at the end there with particularly Hung having a fantastic day and taking second place on dots, which is what obviously we're referencing. Sometimes it does come down to dots, because it's very unlikely that it's going to come down to GL points, because obviously first places is higher ranked than GL points. So it'll be interesting if it does come down to that again, where there's like the same placings, because I think it was first, second, both ESS and Apex last year. So it'd be interesting to see if that happens again for a podium finish.
Yeah, it will be. And yeah, your reference last year and the way that last year finished was just so good. Like that last session was just like, I just have such good memories of that. And we're hoping that we get this kind of same thing. Now you mentioned Ardwa,
Without the
she's in
heat.
the 84 kilo class. There are two other lifters in that class as well, Nikita and Emily. And as you mentioned, they're both lifting on day one. And so it's a little bit of a different strategy, I think, kind of like with Tony in the sense of, that Tony's got it in the bag. Emily, Ardwa has that really big advantage. And I think that's one of the benefits of the system is that, as a premier team, you get that advantage. And if you want that advantage, you've got to earn your way into the premier bracket. So Ardwa, Emily is a really strong lifter from RV Performance. We know that she's improving. She's been constantly improving. I don't really know where her lifts are going to be at, but how do you kind of see that playing out?
Yeah, I did investigate a little bit, and I can't really see much training from Emily. So it's kind of like the unknown in terms of like what kind of total she'll put up. Obviously, she's coming in as the favorite, being she's totaled more than Ardua historically, but it was within 15 kilo margin. So Ardua's just been steadily increasing her total and performances. She had a fantastic performance at Nationals just gone in February in APA. So she had a really good day, and her training is looking fantastic actually. So, and she's very open with her training. She posts all her training, so everyone can go have a look and see what she's doing. And vice versa, I couldn't find anything on Emily, so I don't know Nikita. I don't know either. So it's like I'm in that situation. I'm kind of like they're going on day one, and we can see what they total, see how they go, and then do our best to build a total that's going to be able to win on the day. And it is a critical first place as well, that class, because I've kind of thrown. It's funny, like with team champs, it's like there's still a variable of unknown and luck. Like you kind of, for example, like we are relying on one particular weight class to win over someone else who I won't mention. So I don't want to put any juju out there.
Okay.
But there's some things in our control, which is like Ardua,
Of course.
obviously, trying to pip the totals of the previous day. And then there's a few out of our control where we don't have any athletes in those classes, so we can't like try and go in and beat them, right? And we're kind of relying on them to beat other teams so they don't get the points. And that's a cool element of team champs, right? There is an element of luck in that sense, where some things are out of your control.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the same thing happened last year, I think, with You made reference to the Chads. I think they lost some placing simply because there were other lifters in those classes that stole points off them in day two, and so ironically they won day one, but they weren't even in the top three at the end of the tournament. Whereas
Yes.
Panthers finished second on day one, but finished first overall. So like they actually climbed a
Yeah.
placing a day later. Yeah, so things like that can happen, and I guess that's part of the fun of it, like you described. Let's talk quickly about the 105 class. You mentioned Gabe. This is actually a really competitive group as well. I mean, in the same weight class on the same day, he's got Timothy Wang and Tyson Andrews, both very, very strong lifters. Connor Warren, I'm not so familiar with. He's from Crundle Crew. But there is a bit of depth in this field.
Yeah, it's almost arguably, even though there's only, was it 6 athletes, it's
Mm-hmm.
probably as competitive as the 93s in the sense
Yes.
of there's a fair few, like there's 3 or 4 athletes who are all totaling 700 plus. And we'll be battling it out for first, second, and third. So there's no real clear winner in that one. So I'm very intrigued to see, how like the podium plays out in that one. And obviously, basically, trying to finish top 4 is definitely the goal to get at minimum 2 points. In that one, we'll be chasing a little bit more. So our goal is to hunt down a podium finish in the 105s because we're coming in as, I think, 4th on paper in that one. So it's like some classes, we're going to be the ones getting chased. In example for like Lotta, and then in the 105s, we're the one doing the hunting and chasing. So it is cool in that sense where it's like there's some like it goes both ways, I guess, depending on the weight class. So I'm super excited for Gabriel to have a good day. Like that's definitely our plan. And I mentioned he had some adversity in his body, especially with the last comp just being so recent. So he's been lifting heavy for a while, and it's sometimes that can niggles and things can catch up with you and linger because you never get giving yourself a break as well in an off season. So yeah, the 105s, it's going to be a tough class to podium in for all those boys because I think it's like 3 of them have totaled 750 to 760. But then they've totaled, if they don't have a good day, they've totaled 720, 730s. So it's like there's a big margin there in the 105s, and because they take such big jumps, in particular like deadlifts and squats, it's one missed lift and you can be hunted down in the 105s. So yeah, excited for that one as well. There's so many awesome classes with really stacked fields.
Yeah, excellent. I agree with what you said as well. Like, when these guys are taking 15 kilo jumps and you miss one lift, that's 15 kilos. Or, even worse, you miss a second attempt and then the pressure is on. Do you repeat giving up what would have been your third, or do you go up 5 or 7.5 to try to make up some ground? If you miss that, then you're stuck in your opener, and that really just makes it almost impossible to kind of keep up depending on the level of competition. So, that puts pressure on the coaches, it puts pressure on the lifter. They've got to make the right choices and execute when it kind of matters. You kind of mentioned, not being able to influence some other classes, which is normal. I've got an idea that I've been floating around recently, and I actually haven't said this publicly, so you're going to hear it first, and it'll go live here. But one idea I have for next year is to invite the Premier Bracket teams to submit a B team, and so some of the bigger clubs like yourself, like MSC or the gyms, I suppose, that have bigger rosters, giving you the opportunity to submit a B team to lift on day one. And so in that way, you can, as a bigger club, as a Premier Bracket club, you get to have more lifters in the comp, more lifters involved, a bigger kind of spirit, but also potentially the opportunity to influence other classes that your lifters wouldn't have otherwise been in. I'd have to flesh out how that would work, what the rules would be to make sure there's no gaps where people can really exploit. But what's your first impressions?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at any sport, right, that for the most part there is a B team and an A team, and
it's like a reserves.
a lot of the times, the athletes are fighting to be in the A team, and they might be out of form and go back into the B team, and then vice versa come back. I mean, we can talk about that famous one in the rowing where the B team beat the A team, because wouldn't that be interesting? Imagine that the B team come in and actually win and beat the A team. And it's very rare, but that's happened historically as well. That might be a way for you to actually fill that 25 spots that you want to fill as well. So because it's tough to put a team together, even as a big club, right? It's tough to put a team together because people have got their commitments. There's injuries, there's other competitions. People have gone to Worlds, so it's very difficult to put one team together if you're just an online coach. Like, I imagine that would be almost impossible to put a B team together. But the bigger clubs probably could put a B team, or at least a couple of them could put a B team together, which would add another advantage to your point, being able to be competitive in classes too.
Yeah, I'd have to come up with clear rules about like making swaps, like how many swaps do you get? Do you have to draw your swaps from the B team in the A team? Something like this. Like there'd have to be some stops like this to yeah, like again, the issues that we've had in the past, but it's just an idea and I'm not sure how it would work, but something I've thought about.
Yeah, that's a cool idea. I quite like that you like adding like things every year, the evolution of the team event. And the influence it's had. Even so, the last competitions I held at Apex, I did my first team aspect to the comp, where I had a team had to be a minimum of 3 athletes representing a club or a coach, and their collective dots were basically what won them the team prize. And they had like a bunch of sponsors for the event, so
cool.
They won a bunch of like Birkenstock vouchers, LSKD stuff, some physio stuff. So it was like there was actually a prize outside of obviously people competing to qualify for nationals and to win their class, but then also there was a team element where the 3 best of each team would go against basically one another. And it was a really cool element and people loved it. Like, it was really cool that the best male and best female lifters weren't part of that team either. So
cool.
It really distributed the prizes really well. So that way that the best male and female weren't on the same team and then also won the team event.
Yeah.
So it was, and you could argue this influence has been from Team Champs in the sense that I've like since the, Team Champs, especially 2023's Team Champs, 2020, I was like, I think it's the future of the sport in including a team element to powerlifting. And you can do that with a normal competition. It's
like you found a way to apply that regularly. That's awesome. That's great.
Yeah, and it just added a really cool excitement for everybody. It seemed like everyone loved it. So especially for bigger competitions, you can do it because it was 60 athletes. It was, actually worth doing a team element, where if you only had like 20 athletes in a competition, it wouldn't really be worth obviously doing a team event. But for the bigger events in the future, I'm definitely keen to continue to add like a team element and evolve that, kind of like how Team Champs is evolving, and you're adding more rules and standards, which obviously you've added obviously the Premier bracket. Historically, this year it was the changes, the 2 changes or the 4 changes in collectively over 2 different dates. And then, for example, if you brought this new one in next year, not to say you will, but you could, something like it or, in line with it. It's definitely a good way to continue to evolve the sport.
Cool. Yeah, we'll have to see how things pan out, I suppose, and continue to grow, because that's what we want to do, is just create better standards, high level competition, a much more enjoyable, spectator friendly kind of event. That's what we're looking for. All right, I want to round this off by asking you. Obviously, the natural question is, how do you think Apex are going to stack up this year? You guys finished 3rd last year. It was an awesome performance. Maybe not unexpected, but definitely a pleasant surprise, I suppose, in some sense. You guys were always going to be a competitive team, but to finish on the podium was just a really great achievement, and I was so happy to see you guys there. Where do you guys see Apex, or how do you see Apex stacking up this year? And who are the teams to really watch out for that are really going to fight for that podium place and some of that prize money?
Yeah, I think last year we were probably the underdogs in the sense that, everyone was talking about other teams. I think one coach talked about Apex and then retracted it mistakenly.
You took that personally.
I'll call him out. Yeah, I did take it personally, that one. Look, I've kind of like worked out projections like on paper. So like if you look at like open powerlifting projections, I think Process is is on paper the strongest team now the final nominations are done. It probably was Uplift, but they've actually dropped a few spots. Process has sort of held their position. Alex, like you mentioned, he just brought in the athletes that he had available. Obviously, he has some at Worlds. which has also been very impressive to see some teams send off athletes to Worlds and still bring forward a very competitive team for team champs. I'm very impressed by that. And Process is definitely the example of that, because we know that there's other athletes that are even like more advanced, but they're obviously unavailable due to Worlds. But Process would be on paper the favourite. But I do have a suspicion that being on that first day is going to cost them that pole position. So they might win the first day, but there's too many situations where their athletes can be beaten on the second day in the premier bracket. So I think kind of like what happened to Chad's is going to happen to Process. But they're in a very good position, though, despite the fact they're on day one. They're still in a very, very good position. Apex is in definitely a good position on paper as well. Other teams would be Compound, who's probably, again, another from the first bracket. So I'm very interested to see how Compound do, but I'd put them in my top three as well, which they'd be coming in as the underdog, I guess, in the sense that they haven't represented, or their team is like fresh and new for team champs. And then probably the other two that look out for would be Sim Strength and Uplift. They're going to be competitive, and they're going to be trying to win their classes in the day as well. So that'd be my top five.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty well-rounded kind of approach. It sounds like you've obviously done your research and you've looked into some of these other teams. And I'd have to agree with you on the most part. I think those challenger bracket teams are very, very competitive, have some good lifters. And wouldn't it be amazing to think that in the first two editions of the bracket system, both times you have winners come from day one, almost disproving the advantage that we've kind of like hypothesized that you have by lifting on day two, which obviously is there, but proving that it's not impossible to win from day one. And in fact, it's becoming a trend almost if that's the way it pans out.
Yeah, and look, it's powerlifting. At the end of the day, you're only as strong as you are strong, right? So it's like you can go, their total 800. My best is 700. I just have to total more than 800. But it's like that's not going to happen.
There's nothing you can do.
It's
right.
it's only if you're really neck and neck with somebody that you could potentially, if you did burst them on the same day, you may have lost because of the pressure of the moment, where it takes that pressure away because you're just like, this is what I actually have to do. And you can be a bit more conservative with your attempt selection to make sure you don't miss lifts, to make sure that you beat that person from the previous day. So that's that advantage, and that's where it comes from. But ultimately, if someone's far stronger, on a bad day, they're still going to beat you. And so that's just a reality of powerlifting. But no, I'm excited. I mean, for yourself, like now that you've done this a few years, what would be your favorite thing so far from all the years of team champs you've done?
As in favorite, like memory?
Favorite memory, yeah, sure.
Oh, man, that's a really good
put you on the spot.
Hey, I mean, I mentioned it before, but I guess it stands out was just the second session last year, like the last session last year. When I dreamt up like this, bracket system and the teams thing, part of it is like actually making it digestible, making sure that people understand what's going on. And, ever since I started powerlifting, I always found that to be really lacking. Like, I'm very astute to what's going on in competitions, and the amount of times that I'd be even at local competitions where, of course, you might feel like there's not a lot on stake on hand. But I would see a coach make a change in the last round of deadlifts so that their lifter jumps from third to second, for example, and they've dropped their deadlift 2.5 to make that work, or gone up 2.5, for example, to make that work, so they can win a silver medal. And this person's totaling 300 at 69 kilos in the women's, right? So for all intents and purposes, not that important, but it was important enough that the coach put that change in. And then the announcer doesn't announce it. They don't rile up the crowd and say, this is so that, I'm just going to use one of your lifters' names. This is so Arjun can win the silver medal in this class, and get people pumped about that and actually put some pressure on the lifter. I find that such a shame when that happens. And so, one of the guys in the gym, Jeff, he's I'm going to get this wrong, like a software developer, a programmer guy, very intelligent. So if you need some development work, go speak to him. I can put you in contact. But he created for us that scoreboard, that team scoreboard. And so last year, having that team scoreboard updating live as, Timothy Wang made his lifts and as Hung made his lifts, and seeing the team placings shifting, and actually being able to understand that, like the crowd being able to watch that on the scoreboard and actually understand what's going on. And I was on the microphone, so I was able to like actually announce everything clearly and say, okay, this is for this point, and watch as this happens. If this person makes their opener, then they're going to move up into first place, and then this team's going to drop down in third, and then they'd make the lift, and everyone look at the scoreboard, and you'd see it all shift. And then, for example, the ESS crowd was freaking awesome, and like they were so hyped, and like just that energy was awesome. So that definitely has to be like a big standout to me, because it was 40 degrees, and I'm telling you, our gym has never had that many people in that tiny space before, which tells you a lot that people wanted to watch it and people wanted to see it all happen live.
Yeah, it's a good point that like how brutally hot it had been for 3 days straight, and yet there was still so many people there that wanted to be part of that, even if they weren't lifting or whatever, that they were so interested in the results. And definitely wasn't a letdown. Like for me personally as well, it was definitely the most intense competition I've ever been part of. Trying to get all my because I had 3 athletes in the same flight as well.
Yes.
So trying to get them all ready to be warmed up while handling Lotta, who was in the other, was like intense, very, very intense to get like everyone ready, and they're all sweating like crazy. They're just drenched.
You're sweating like crazy. Everyone's sweating.
They were drenched. It was so funny watching like just the like pouring off them as they're trying to warm up on one rack. There's like 3 guys who are all like 110 kilo plus, like trying to like. It was intense is the word, because the crowd was crazy, and as you point out, because it was coming down to dots between second and third, we were trying to like do the math and what do we need to do to actually to win this, or at least play second? Because I guess that was the unfortunate thing about team champs is last year when the team was going to win, we knew they were going to win. Like there was no chance of taking Panthers. At that point, it was just like they've got it, but yet it still was very intense finish, despite the fact that we knew Panthers was going to win. And probably a big part of that is because of having the dot system up, where everyone's very aware. Because sometimes you'll like competitions. I mean, it's one of my pet peeves is when I don't know who's won. I'm like watching it. I'm like, who won? Like if you don't have lifting casts and you don't have really good announcers or MCs, live stream announcers, I should say. It's very difficult to know, like they're pulling for first, or, unless you have all that data there, or if you're right there, at the competition itself, you have no idea what is happening. Where in that situation, everyone was very aware of everyone's placing and what they needed to do, to at least place and do well. So it was a good addition, and what an intense comp that was. Thankfully, we don't have that heat again, because that definitely rattled a lot of people.
We'll wait on the forecast. I'm sure it won't be that hot in the middle of June. So,
yeah, I mean, fuck, the way this summer's gone, Jesus! Like we had 6 months of summer. It was the best summer I've ever seen. In
went
Melbourne,
on forever, didn't it?
It did. It was glorious, but yeah, you won't see 40 degree days in June.
Let's just hope it's not the opposite and it's not, icy cold and rainy. Look, man, it's been great chatting to you. You've always got great insights. I know you're super well prepared and you're super excited for this comp. And I really feel the support from you for our event. I know you believe in it. And yeah, it's always a pleasure to have Apex coming back and hopefully giving the top podium spots a bit of a rattle again. Yeah,
I'm glad I can be that support network for you as well, because I want to see you continue to do more and be successful, right? So it's keen for it and keen for obviously this year's, but then even next year's.
Cool, mate. Appreciate it. Right, you take care. We'll see you in a few weeks.
Thank you, brother.